The 12th of September, 1944. Camp Algona, Iowa. The train brakes scream against the rails, and the prairie answers with a chorus of cicadas. Hot creosote breathes up from the ties. You're shoulder to shoulder with men in feldgrau, dusty tunics glazed with salt, and the canvas doors roll aside to a wall of daylight. A guard tower cuts a neat square out of the blue Midwestern sky. An American sentry leans into his M1 Garand, sling taut, while a .30 cal Browning peers over sandbags like a suspicious eye. Los Raus, barks a Feldwebel, out of habit. But the U.S. Sergeant below ginger hair, sun-reddened neck speaks evenly. Single file, gents. Keep it moving. His name tape reads, Malloy. He smells of wool and machine oil and the sweet hay of the fields beyond the wire. Obergefreiter Karl Weber steps down first, boots sinking slightly into the gravel. He swallows the taste of coal dust and imagines the posters back home. Skeletal prisoners under a foreign sun, beaten, starved, forgotten. He tightens his grip on the rolled blanket and glances at Lieutenant Hans Kruger, 2 men ahead, the jaw set, the officer's belt still polished, despite the months then at Feldwebel Otto Brandt behind him, who mutters, "Keep your eyes open. Count the guns. Counting is easy. The arithmetic of survival never changes. Towers at the corners. Searchlights. A double fence with rust-brown barbs. Yet the fence lines the edge of a town of wooden huts, numbered neatly, avenues chalked straight, a flag rippling on a white pole. A brass bell somewhere rings, cheerful as school. They pass beneath a sign that says in English and German, Prisoner of War Camp Geneva Convention observed. The word Genf nudges Weber's memory lectures on rights and duties, on parcels and male fantasies, he thinks. Still, they queue through a light-framed building where a medical corpsman checks temperatures with a quick clap of the thermometer, eyes focused, professional. Another man sprays DDT dust along collars and cuffs. The powder rises like ghostly flour. Tags are registered, names spelled slowly onto index cards. Weber, Carl O. Jeffreiter. The American lieutenant at the table has horn-rimmed spectacles and a precise hand. He offers each man a small tin badge stamped with a number. Wear it with your uniform, he says in serviceable German. For mail, you will write home. From the intake hut, the column turns past a volleyball court, its net strung tight and bright as a fishing line, and an empty diamond traced into the grass with white lime. The smell hits them then, onions softening in butter, pepper cracking, fat searing on griddles. It stops the line almost as effectively as a command. They angle toward the mess hall, a long clapboard building with screened windows and figures in aprons barrel past with tin pitchers. Weber catches a glimpse through the doorway, steam funneling from steel kettles big enough to bathe in, cooks in white caps flipping beef on flat tops, the hiss and pop like tiny fireworks. Inside, the noise is human again, trays sliding, boots scuffing, the sudden hush of men facing food. The first plate lands with a clatter. A steak, browned at the edges, a sheen of juices pulled into a puddle beside it. Mashed potatoes sculpted into a neat hill with a crater of brown gravy. Green beans bright and slick. A thick slice of white bread glistening with a pad of butter already softening. A mug of coffee whose scent cuts clean through sleep and train smoke. 9, Brandt whispers before he can stop himself. Das ist unmöglich. Impossible. He glances at the guards, upright, bored, talking about a corn harvest and something called the Hawkeyes, then back at the plate like it's a trap. Kruger takes his tray as if at inspection. He sits, straight-backed, and cuts the steak with the edge of a fork. The steel whispers on enamel. He tastes cautiously. Weber watches the way the lieutenant's face, always so composed, moves from suspicion to calculation, then, finally, to something like defeat or relief. The lieutenant sets down the fork and smooths his napkin. Eat, Obergefreiter, he says without looking up. It'll get cold. Across the table, 2 Americans in khaki shirts and white aprons carry in trays of small enamel bowls packed with a pale, frosted substance. The air shifts milk-sweet, vanilla thick and cold, even in this late heat of September. A corporal announces it without ceremony. Dessert, ice cream. He says it like a practical outcome, not a luxury. A few Germans laugh in disbelief. The sound sharp and nervous. Someone crosses himself. Weber imagines the brackish coffee in Tunisia, the wormy bread on the transport ship, the tinny stew aboard the troop train, and this impossible cold sliding over his tongue as he takes his first spoonful. The ice crystals popping like distant static. The spoon trembles in his hand. Sergeant Malloy lingers near the table rows, thumbs hooked in his web belt. An M3 submachine gun rides in a sling under his arm, muzzle down, magazine taped like a carpenter's habit. He watches not menacingly, more like a referee. "You're under the convention," he says when Kruger finally asks, in crisp German, whether such rations are typical or tonight is a performance for a Red Cross inspector. "You'll work. You'll be paid in camp scrip. You'll write letters on Tuesdays and Fridays. Chaplain holds service Sundays. Don't cause trouble. You won't get any." He taps the menu board hung beside the scullery. Monday beef, Tuesday chicken, Wednesday pork chops. The chalk is smudged at the bottom. Saturday movie night, Casablanca. The word detonates quietly down the benches. Ein Kino, a private blurts, and earns a glare from Brandt. A cinema, here, inside the wire. Weber tries to picture it, screens and projectors, a room going dark together, the hum of a reel, people laughing. Then he banishes the thought. This is strategy, he tells himself. Softening. Propaganda. But the steak is real. The coffee is real. The ice cream is a small square of winter melting on his tongue. After mess, they are marched past barracks, with open windows. Inside, double bunks, in perfect rows, straw mattresses crisp and ticking, wool blankets stacked, footlockers numbered. A pot-bellied stove squats in the center, like a warm heart waiting to beat. A bulletin board near the door lists work detachments, sugar beets cannery timber, and, beneath, library hours, in careful, bilingual print. The sunset outside shivers through cottonwoods beyond the fence. The field smells of cut grass and gasoline from a distant tractor. Weber pauses at the barracks threshold and listens. Somewhere beyond the wire, down a gravel road that disappears between the corn, a bat cracks a ball and men cheer in English. He counts the steps to his assigned bunk, 12 from the door. Second tier. He sits, hands still on his knees, and stares at an index card pinned over the footboard with his new number. Krieger writes something into a small notebook. Brandt says, "Lo, we don't forget who we are." Weber doesn't answer. His stomach is warm and heavy. He smells vanilla on his own breath. Outside, the bell rings again, and for a moment it sounds like a church across a square at home. For the first time since capture, the fear in his chest loosens its knot just a little, and in the space where fear was, a question takes root, dangerous in its own way. If the enemy feeds you like this, what else did they lie about? The 16th of September, 1944. The bell tolls once, then twice, and the prairie dusk folds itself into the camp like a neatly tucked blanket. Floodlights snap alive on the towers, cones of pale dust spinning through moths. But inside the rec hall, the world narrows to a square of white hung from rafters, and the warm tick of a 35mm projector. The machine sits on a plywood table guarded like a field gun. Bell and Howell, twin reels shouldered on steel arms. A U.S. corporal feathering the focus wheel with 2 nicotine-stained fingers. "Keep the aisle clear," he tells the German orderlies in serviceable Deutsch. "No smoking. If the reel breaks, stay seated." Obergefreiter Karl Weber slides onto a wooden bench beside Feldwebel Brandt and Lieutenant Kruger. The room smells of floor wax, denim, and popcorn oil, an extravagance that makes Brandt's jaw twitch. On the front row, a tall Swabian named Dieter hides a bottle of the camp's newest magic behind his knees, Coca-Cola, sweating through green glass, the cap scarred by an opener nailed to a doorpost. He tilted the bottle for Weber earlier that afternoon at the canteen window. where script printed chits, Algona Camp, exchanging 1 unit, traded for luxuries under a clerk's ledger, and a sign that quoted the convention in both languages. One sip and Weber blinked at the cold, bubbles nipping his palate, caramel and faint clove under the ice. Amerikanische Medizin, Dieter had said, grinning, and the nickname stuck. The lights die. A scratchy fanfare shivers the screen, and letters march across a globe. Newsreel first. Tractors pulling artillery over muddy roads in Italy. Women riveting wing skins in Michigan. A boy in Nebraska raising a 4-H hog with a ribbon on its ear. Weber hears the audience breathing together, Germans and a handful of American guards along the back wall. When the feature begins Casablanca, as promised, the room leans forward as one. The projectors shudder, whir, clack, whir braids with dialogue of all the gin joints, floats over bare heads and crew cuts. Laughter erupts, then dies, then returns at the exact rhythm the film expects. In the dark, it is possible to forget watches and wire. Kruger does not laugh. He watches the guards in profile, their faces silvered by the screen, and measures the distance to the exit. Weber watches Kruger, and quietly watches himself. No hunger gnawing, no sunburn cracking, a body that has stopped flinching at every footfall on gravel. When La Marseillaise drowns the Germans in Rick's Café, a sergeant at the door, Malloy clears his throat and looks at the planked ceiling. Brandt's hands tighten on his knees. The moment slides past. The lights come up. The world, for a beat, remains mercifully slow. Morning returns the logic of war, just with different tools. Reveille under a sky as big as a cathedral. Roll call by barracks number. A Red Cross poster, taped to the mess door, reminding POWs of complaint procedures. A chalkboard listing the day's Arbeitskommandos. Weber's name appears under Sugar Beats, Field Crew 3. He shoulders a lunch pail, stamped U.S., layers inside wrapped in wax paper, ham sandwich, wedge of cheese, apple, small paper sack of sugar cookies. Don't trade the fruit, the German camp elder advises. Scurvy is a memory none of them wants back. A 2.5 truck coughs them north beyond the wire. 2 guards sit on the tailgate with legs swinging, M1S between their knees and the easy tension of men sure of their home ground. Beyond the fences, the prairie lies blue-green to the horizon, rows of beets combed neatly, ditches churring with crickets. The farm boss, Mr. Ellison, plaid shirt, straw hat that has seen a decade of summers, meets them at the field's edge and taps his watch. 8 hours, he says to Malloy, then to the Germans. Keep your backs straight, and you'll keep your backs. He demonstrates the hose angle like he's teaching a son. Hands go to work. Chip, lift, toss. Chip, lift, toss. The rhythm soothes. Letters will be written about this. Weber thinks about the generosity of apples and the taste of cold water drawn from a galvanized can under an elm, about the way local children stare shyly from a fence and then wave like it's a parade. At noon, the guards uncap canteens and the farm boss hands out coffee from a dented thermos. Cream? Sugar? He asks without irony. Dieter baptizes a sugar cookie in his mug and licks the edge clean. Brandt keeps his chin up and declines. Then, after a beat, accepts a plain cup as if it's a treaty signing. When a boy pedals by on a red Schwinn and blurts, "Are you the Germans?" the boss tips his hat. "Workers," he says evenly, "and guests of Uncle Sam till the war's done." The boy nods as if this answers every question the world might contain. Back in camp, payday arrives with a rubber stamp. Script books are issued through a slot in the administration hut. The amounts are exacting. So many units for so many hours at the local agricultural rate. Minus for canteen purchases, no cash exchanging hands. The clerk explains again, patient as a teacher, that the convention permits labor of non-military nature, that wages help maintain order, that theft of scrip is useless outside the wire. "You can send money home," he adds, pointing with his pencil to a second window where forms wait and an American with perfect penmanship writes "Outgoing Germany" on envelopes that will be censored with neat rectangles. Letters Tuesdays and Fridays, 24 lines per page, 3 pages. No maps, no troop numbers, no politics. Weber writes, before lights out. His pencil skates slowly, the nib catching on fiber. Liebe Mutter. He describes the food and then deletes the adjectives, replacing them with nouns. Steak. Potatoes. Ice cream. He writes about work and omits the ache in his shoulders. He writes about baseball because on Wednesday, an American chaplain in a black shirt and soft voice had explained the rules outside the wire and then set a bat in Brandt's hands. Left shoulder, Sergeant, the chaplain said, smiling as if blessing a bride. Lead with your hips. When Brandt finally struck a pitch clean and watched the ball arc white over the second baseman's head, the camp had erupted with a sound that belonged to every nation and none. He does not write about Casablanca. He does not write about the scene where a man chooses against himself, because something about the choice unsettled him long after taps. He does write about Coca-Cola, folding that word like a talisman into the middle of the second page so the censor's knife might miss it. He copies his new number under his signature for the mail clerk. The Red Cross rules posted above the desk flicker in the kerosene light. Parcels permitted. Religious services allowed. Discipline to be humane. Punishment when necessary. Recorded. He adds a last line. Ich bin gesund. I am healthy. It feels both true and treacherous. Lights out brings the camp to a hush-like surf. Somewhere, a harmonica sends up a tune from the Rhineland. The guard tower lamp sweeps across the floorboards in pale stripes. In the bunk below, Dieter snores softly and clutches a bottle cap like a saint's relic. 2 bunks over, Kruger's pen stills. He slides his notebook into his pillowcase and stares into the dark, lips moving in a prayer Weber cannot hear. Brandt turns pages in a tattered field manual until his breathing evens. Weber listens to the night and to the bell that will ring again, summoning them to work and wages, and if rumor holds, a Saturday double feature with a cartoon about a rabbit who always wins. You tell yourself not to believe in miracles. You count towers, distances, angles of fire, but the real arithmetic won't stop. Calories, letters, rules obeyed, respect returned. A different kind of order hums beneath the barbed wire, and it works on a man the way rain works on a stone. Not today, not tomorrow, but certainly. The 23rd of September 1944. Morning rolls over Camp Algona like a slow-tide fog hanging low, the guard towers rising as gray islands. In the admin hut, a clock ticks loudly, expecting something. That something arrives in a black sedan with small flags snapping from fenders. The International Committee of the Red Cross. 2 men in dark suits climb out with clipboards and measured steps. A U.S. captain meets them at the gate with a leather-bound copy of the Geneva Convention tucked under his arm like a hymnal. Sergeant Malloy trails with a folder of typed rosters. Random barracks, one inspector says in careful English, then repeats it in German so everyone can hear how the process is meant to be heard openly and twice. Obergefreiter Karl Weber stands at the end of Barracks 12 while the inspectors lift a mattress, examine a stove, peer into the washroom where bars of soap sit like white bricks at attention. They ask about wages, about parcels, about discipline. Kruger answers with a practiced cool, his officer's cadence unruffled. Brandt contributes gruffly when prompted. Weber offers the simple truth. Pay chits in exact amounts. Work in sugar beets and canneries. A guard's warning last Tuesday when a card game got too loud. Followed by nothing more than a confiscated deck and a lecture about quiet hours. The inspector nods and writes. He pauses at the bulletin board where rules hang in both languages. This is good, he says softly to the American captain, tapping the line that promises punishment will be recorded and appeal allowed. In the mess hall, the inspectors sit to the same stew everyone else eats. One of them, a Swiss with a pencil mustache, asks Weber what he misses most from home. The answer leaps out before he can fence it. Bread that tastes like our village oven. The Swiss smiles and points to the kitchen, where an American baker, forearms dusted in flour, is sliding tins from a red-mouthed oven. Perhaps not your village, the man says, but bread is bread. The baker, hearing his name, grins and wraps a still warm loaf in a towel for the visitors to tear and share. Steam crosses the table like a benediction. The inspection ends with signatures and quiet handshakes. A copy of the report will travel across oceans through neutral hands. Red stamps will march across each page like tiny flags. Any complaints? The Swiss asks a final time, pen poised. Silence. Not because there is nothing to wish for, there is always a wish to be home, but because the ledger of the day tallies in the black. Afternoons now bend towards something new. Near the rec hall, a group of prisoners, carpenters, before the war, and one art student with clever fingers have commandeered a corner behind a snow fence. They saw and sand and glue. They argue about proportions in practiced whispers. From scavenged boards and gypsum and flour paste, a shape rises under muslin like a ship under sail. Weber becomes a pair of hands there after work, handing up nails, holding a frame steady, while the art student Karl Fritz, broad-shouldered, a soft dialect from near Cologne, sketches with a carpenter's pencil. Ein Krippenbild, Fritz murmurs, eyes narrowed. A nativity. For Advent, if the Americans allow it. Malloy watches the progress with that same referee calm. When Fritz asks, in halting English, for wire and paint and maybe a spool of cotton batting for clouds, Malloy shrugs. I can scrounge, he says, and scrounges. The choir begins as a joke and infects the evenings. A chaplain in a black shirt with a small white tab lends hymnals. A violin appears. A harmonica falls in obediently. German voices turn familiar carols inside out, finding harmonies that surprise them. On Sundays, English and German hymns share the chapel air, Ein feste Burg, followed by Amazing Grace, the camp's breath braided briefly into one rope of sound. Weber stands between Dieter and Brandt, his tenor shaky at first and then confident. When the chaplain reads the Beatitudes, Krieger's eyelids flicker. He says nothing afterward, just writes a line in his small notebook. Blessed are the peacemakers. He underlines it, hard. Work continues. Beets piled in wagons, canned peaches sweet on the tongue, an Iowa October that tastes like wood smoke and cold metal. The boy on the red Schwinn graduates to shy questions. Does Germany have baseball, he asks. No, Weber says, smiling. But now Germany has baseball players. He has learned to pivot his hips, to watch the spin, to feel the clean click of wood on leather. When he runs the bases, the wire fence along the diamond fades to a background line, the way a studio wall disappears when the camera rolls. Mail arrives in sighs and stabs. A letter from Weber's mother, ink faint, sentences clipped by black rectangles where the censor's blade lifted out hope and fear in equal measure. She writes of potatoes and coal, of a roof patched after a raid, of the cat that is taken to sleeping inside an empty coal scuttle. She writes, we are proud of you. She writes, come home when God allows. Weber folds the page carefully and places it in the breast pocket of his tunic as if armor. Dieter gets a parcel from an aunt in Switzerland, biscuits and a small wedge of cheese, and breaks it into tiny sacramental pieces that circle the table once and vanish. Not everything is soft. One evening a prisoner named Vogel tests the fence. He doesn't touch it, he knows the wire isn't electrified, but he walks too close and studies the rhythm of the tower's searchlight. Malloy is there before the second pass, boots whispering on gravel. Don't do it, he says, low and tired. Vogel lifts his chin like a man about to argue with fate. Malloy gestures with his chin toward the rec hall, where laughter leaks through the windows. Bugs Bunny again, translated into a language of laughter that needs no captions. You try it, you'll lose that, Malloy says. And maybe more. Vogel hesitates, then grinds his boot heel into the dust and walks back toward the lights. Later, his name appears on the bulletin board under discipline. Loss of privileges 7 days. The record sits there like a carved lesson. Rules enforced. Dignity intact. December comes. Snow arranges itself neatly along the barrack roofs. The breath, from the mess hall doors, is a warm river. The Nativity is unveiled on a Saturday, floodlit in a corner of the yard near the chapel. Angels seem to hover out of painted clouds. Shepherds brace against a stylized wind. Mary's face is serene and very slightly German. Townspeople are invited in, women in wool coats, men stamping snow from boots, children with red hands pressed to the fence. A local choir trades verses with the prisoners' chorus, the harmony landing in that place where memory and the present shake hands. Mr. Ellison is there, in his straw-battered hat, wintered now, with a felt cap pulled low. He squeezes Weber's shoulder, once a quiet, almost embarrassed gesture. "Fine work," he says. "Fine work." Weber writes home that night beneath the new tin star nailed to the barrack beam. He writes about the display, but he does not call it a nativity, he writes. A scene we built from the Bible because he wants the letter to pass and because he doesn't quite know what to call the feeling it left behind. He writes that the Americans stood in the cold with them and sang words that have crossed borders longer than any army. He puts his number beneath his signature. He adds a line he never imagined he would. They keep their word here. It is like a second ration he did not expect, and he is not sure how to eat it. Later, in the barracks, Dieter studies his Coca-Cola cap and says, "When I go home, I'll tell them about this bottle." Brandt snorts, skeptical and protective as ever. Krieger closes his notebook and stares at the rafters. "Tell them about the rules," he says quietly. "Tell them about the rules that held." Weber listens to the wind working the eaves and to an orchestra of distant hammers, the sound of the nativity stand being braced for deeper snow. The camp sleeps. The prairie breathes. A truth he can't yet speak nests under his ribs and waits for spring. The 10th of March, 1945. The snow in the drainage ditch withdraws in ragged white tongues, and the camp's gravel paths reappear like old scars. A wind from the south tugs at the flag and carries a smell of thawed earth and machine oil. In the yard, guards strip canvas wraps from the tower brownings and run an oiled patch through the barrels. On the diamond, a German with carpenter's hands chalks a lime line that wants to smear under the damp. When the bell rings for work details, the chalked board lists Sugar Beets Planting Crews 1-5 and newly added Sawmill Timber Crew 2. Weber finds his name with the same little leap he used to feel at a posted train schedule. They ride out in a deuce and a half, wood sideboards rattling, boots knocking together like horses' teeth. Sergeant Malloy sits up front with the driver, elbow out the window, cap cocked back, an M3 grease gun on a strap across his chest. Behind them, the prairie is turning green at the edges, fields squared out to the horizon, a barn roof flashing tin in the sun. At the Ellison farm, the boss is already knee-deep in seed sacks. He splits one with a pocket knife and pours beet seed into a hopper, as if feeding a tame animal. "Hands clean and steady," he says to the crew in English, then mimes the motion until everyone nods. Weber likes the rhythm of the planter, the clink of chain, the soft rattle of seed, the faint, damp perfume of the turned furrow. By noon he can predict the calluses where the hoe will bite along the thumb pad, where the handle will bruise the heel of his palm. He welcomes it. Work makes sense here the way March drills once did. When they break for lunch, Mr. Ellison's wife arrives at the field's edge with mason jars of lemonade beaded with cold. She has the reserve of a woman who has lived through lean years and found a way to keep her kindness intact. The guards take first cups, then nod for the Germans to step up. Dieter mutters Amerikanische Medizen Mark II, and everyone laughs easier than they mean to. Back in camp, baseball becomes a league because everything American wants organizing. The chaplain draws up a schedule on butcher paper. Barracks 9 versus Barracks 12 on Wednesdays. A Townies versus POW All-Stars exhibition if the captain signs off. A private from Minnesota, rail-thin and loose-limbed, runs a clinic on hitting mechanics, gesturing with a bat the way a conductor does with a baton. "Squash the bug," he says, twisting his shoe in the dirt. "See it, then let it travel." Brant listens like a drill instructor then. To the league's delight, lines a ball into right center with the exact, clipped efficiency he applies to folding a blanket. Krieger plays first base with the grace of a fencer, not a step wasted. He tags runners with a politeness that feels like a lesson. Movie night adapts to the thaw. The rec hall windows are cranked open, the projector's fan blowing warm air and film dust into the evening. The queue at the canteen bends around the corner, the clerk tears script sheets and slides bottles across the wood. Coca-Cola, orange soda, the occasional chocolate bar that vanishes like a rumor of spring. One week it's going my way, another it's a Gary Cooper Western. Both draw the same chorus of whistles when the hero does the right thing against himself. When a Laurel and Hardy short precedes the feature, the guards drop their shoulders and laugh with the same helplessness as the prisoners. Because some laws, gravity, farce do not care about fences. News arrives in a different key, and it changes the air, even when the projector's whir tries to fill the room. The bulletin board that once hosted choir lists and work rosters begins to pin up clippings from Stars and Stripes, mimeographed summaries translated into German by a camp clerk with careful schoolteacher printing. March, Cologne falls. April 4, American troops cross the Weser. April 12, the notice is handwritten, bordered in black. The president is dead. Guards read it in silence, caps crumpled in their hands, faces oddly young. In the yard that evening, Malloy smokes 2 cigarettes back to back and says nothing to anyone for a long time. And then the other news, the kind that changes a man's sense of weight in the world. A Red Cross delegate reads a statement in the chapel, neutral words about camps discovered in the East, about conditions that make the room go cold even with the stove ticking. He does not show photographs. He does not need to. Brant sits as if braced for an impact that never comes. Kruger's pen pauses above his notebook and does not move. Later, in the barracks, men who once argued about doctrine argue about how a person continues after learning such a thing. Weber lies awake and feels the bed's rough ticking and imagines his mother's hands on dough and thinks of the Nativity's calm, painted face under winter floodlights. He cannot make the figures fit. Work does not stop for grief. The sawmill detail comes back sunburned and resin-streaked, breathing the incense of pine and diesel. Weber likes the saw's straight honesty, teeth singing, boards stacking, a rhythm of push and catch and set. The mill foreman is a quiet man with a tobacco stain on his lip and a habit of patting each finished plank once, as if to bless it. He lets the Germans try the ripsaw one at a time, and when Dieter's cut runs true end to end, the foreman grunts, "Straight as a string," and hands him a red bandana for the sweat. Letters accelerate, then multiply, then crack with missing pieces. One afternoon, Weber gets 3 at once, 2 months old, 4 months old, then something new enough to smell of wet ink. The censors have been busy, but between the black rectangles he reads the shapes of rooms he knows. The chipped blue bowl, the door that sticks in damp, the sound of the church bell when the wind comes across the fields. His mother writes that bread is thinner, but still bread, that a neighbor's son has not been seen since December, that if he can send money he should, but if he cannot, then he should send his prayers instead, which weigh less in the bags and arrive faster. He takes his script to the window and fills out the form. The clerk writes with that perfect penmanship and stamps each line with an ink pad that smells like a schoolroom. Outgoing Germany. Then May slides into camp like a held breath released. The 8th of May, 1945. The captain posts it on the board at 0900, and the sound that erupts is not a cheer so much as a complicated exhale, some sobbing, some laughter, some tight, bitter silence. VE Day. The guards shake hands, serious and awkward. The chaplain rings the chapel bell until the rope burns his palms, then rubs them on his trousers and rings again. The POW choir meets the town choir on the gravel between barracks and sings "Now Thank We All Our God" with a sturdiness that surprises everyone. There is no gloating. There is relief, and there is bewilderment, and there is the sudden question that floods every bunk like a bright, cold tide. What now? That night, the projector throws a newsreel of crowds in New York and London, hats in the air, Sailors kissing strangers, headlines big enough to feel in the chest. The guard at the door, Malloy, always Malloy, keeps his hands folded on the sling of his M3 and watches the flicker with a stillness that might be reverence or exhaustion. When the lights come up, he clears his throat. There'll be a change in schedules, he says in German. Repatriation boards, more work details, maybe different ones. The convention still holds until you go home. The way he says home is careful, as if the word could break. Later, after taps, Weber lies awake and tries to picture the road back. There will be trains again, and ships. There will be questions at borders, and questions at kitchen tables, and an empty stool somewhere that belonged to someone who will not be back to claim it. He watches the guard light sweep the rafters, and remembers the first night, the taste of butter and pepper, the cold miracle of ice cream, the sound of a crowd laughing in the dark at a joke that lands just so. He thinks of the arithmetic he could not stop doing: calories, letters, rules, respect, and realizes it has become something else entirely, a ledger of how men treat other men when they have no reason to. He does not know how to write that to his mother in a way that will pass a censor's knife. He knows she will read between the lines. In the morning, the chalkboard will show new columns: interviews Group A, B, C, work crews hold, choir, voluntary. The diamond's lime lines will glow against fresh grass. The saw will sing again. A boy on a red bicycle will wave at a passing truck and shout, "When you going home?" into road dust that tastes like flour. And Weber will answer the only way he can. "Soon," he'll say. Soon, I think. He will not add the rest that he is carrying a story heavier and kinder than he expected, and that he will try, when he arrives, to tell it true. The 2nd of February 1946. The prairie wind comes with teeth again, rattling the tin roofs and whistling through the seams of the barracks like a fifer marching alone. Frost crusts the ruts outside the admin hut, and on the bulletin board a fresh sheet curls at the thumbtacks. Repatriation Group C. Report 0700. Beneath, in careful block letters, a second line that feels like a held breath written down: standby for orders. Obergefreiter Karl Weber folds his blankets into the neatest squares he has made in years and sets them at the foot of his bunk, as if this, too, were a courtesy. Beside them he lays his possessions in a single, honest row: a Red Cross Testament with a cracked spine, 2 letters folded to soft fabric, a harmonica that is not his but will be returned by noon, a Coca-Cola cap, green glass flecked along the rim, the metal winking like a coin from a sunken ship. Feldwebel Brandt fusses with his belt until the brass looks like a mirror. Lieutenant Kruger writes one last line in his pocket notebook, taps the page twice, and closes it with the finality of a shutter. At the processing desk, a captain studies lists, while a sergeant stamps dates. The rubber thunk, oddly tender, after so many years of commands barked against weather. The questions are always the same now, their edges blunted by repetition: name, rank, unit if known, town of origin. Will you sign to work 1 more week if the weather holds for the sugar beet harvest? Weber answers yes, because the arithmetic of decency still counts at the edge of departure, because Mr. Ellison's handshake, firm and unadorned, asked without asking, because leaving a field half-finished feels like an insult to the ground that fed him. The captain nods once. Appreciated, he says. Boat's not till the end of the month anyhow. The camp folds around the day like a set being struck. In the rec hall, a quartermaster inventories folding chairs with a pencil behind his ear. The projector is boxed, Bell and Howell sleeping under canvas, as if it were a veteran laid to rest. The choir board comes down. Someone saves the thumbtacks in a tin that once held tobacco. The nativity survives a second winter. Fritz and the carpenters touch up the paint where weather took a nibble, but now the figures are carefully wrapped, Mary's face disappearing into muslin like someone going upstairs to nap. They asked to keep it in town, Fritz says, cheeks pinked from the cold. In the city hall, maybe. They say it belongs to both sides. He smiles a small, astonished smile at the idea of a thing made behind wire living free in a place without guards. There is a last ball game because there must be. The sky is the hard blue of enamel, and the dirt is winterfast. The bat feels like iron in the hands until the blood remembers. Guards stand along the first base line with their caps pulled low. Townspeople line the fence in coats, breath steaming like cattle in a morning lot. The Townies vs. POW All-Stars banner from last summer is pulled across the backstop again, edges frayed, the letters proud. "One more," the chaplain says, palming a scuffed Spalding, and tosses it to Brant for the first pitch. Brant impossibly. Brant smiles. He shakes his shoulders out like a prize fighter and throws. The ball hisses across a tight seam of cold air and pops the mitt loud enough to startle a baby into laughter. Weber bats second. He digs his heel into the box, twists squash the bug, and watches a fastball travel. He lets it come deep. The sound is cream when he meets it. The line drive skipping past the second baseman's glove with the precision of a good order. He rounds first and glances at the wire and does not see it. He sees only Dieter thundering toward home, Malloy umpiring at the plate, with that same imperturbable calm, one hand prepared to carve the air safe. The score hardly matters, but of course the game ends on a play that must be argued, dust, elbows, laughter like a barn full of swallows. The chaplain lifts both arms anyway, and the crowd decides that this means everyone has won. In the afternoon, the Ellisons drive in, Mr. Ellison hat in hand, Mrs. Ellison with a tin that smells like molasses and brown sugar. She looks each man in the face when she offers a cookie, as if taking attendance of a class she has come to love. "You did right by the rose," Mr. Ellison says to Weber. Straight as a mason's string. He fumbles in his coat pocket, produces a folded photograph, and presses it into Weber's palm, a snapshot of the planting crew last spring. The deuce and a half hunched behind them, furrows like sheet music across the ground. "So you can prove to folks you didn't sit idle," he says, and the attempt at gruffness veils something brighter and much more dangerous in his eyes. The farewell service fills the chapel and spills onto the gravel. English and German weave together again. Now thank we all, our God. Sturdier even than last spring, voices cracking on notes they had the grace to hit last year with ease. The Red Cross man in the pencil mustache reads out repatriation numbers like a litany, his accent smoothing the edges. Malloy stands at the back with his cap pressed flat against his ribs. When it ends, he waits until the shuffling, the blowing of noses, the slow drift toward the mess hall have thinned to a trickle. Only then does he step forward. "You boys kept the rules," he says in German, picking each word like a careful step onto uncertain ice. "It made us keep ours too." Krieger salutes him straight spine, a gesture once given to different flags, and the sergeant returns it, not quite by the book. Brant grips Malloy's hand once, hard, then backs away before his face changes against his will. Dieter, grinning with an almost feral brightness, slips the Coca-Cola cap into Malloy's palm. "A relic," he says in English, that has learned to joke. For, when you tell this story, Malloy holds the little circle of tin like a coin he cannot spend. Night comes early in February. The train waits with a panting impatience beyond the wire, black cars breathing steam. The platform is a stripped-down thing of planks and paint and necessity. A lieutenant reads names, and the column moves the way a winter river moves, when ice gives under it slow, sure, noisy in places without meaning to be. The guards stand at parade rest. Rifles at their sides are now punctuation instead of verbs. Each man carries a burlap sack stamped U.S. Army and the miraculous uniform weight of his own body. Weber steps to the edge of the platform and turns once, against instruction, to take a last inventory. The tower lamps stare back blankly. The diamond is a pale geometry under frost. From the rec hall window open just enough, a last warm vein of light spills, carrying with it the smell of boiled coffee and floor wax. He sees the chapel roofline, spare and honest against the starlight, and the box that holds the sleeping projector in a corner of the office, The bell and Howell's reels nested like halos. He finds Malloy in the crowd and raises a hand. The sergeant's chin flicks up a millimeter in reply. It is enough. Inside the car, the wooden benches are hard and correct. Webbing straps creak as men stow sacks and settle. A Red Cross volunteer, young, hair tucked in a wool cap, threads the aisle with a basket. Oranges like little suns, paper cups, a thermos of coffee. Luck to you, she says in German learned from index cards. Safe home. As the car lurches, Weber feels the tug of the engine pull through him, the same way a good word can pull a man forward. He takes out his mother's letter, reads the line that says, "Come home, when God allows," and sets the page on his knee to write back by the tremor of the wheels. Liebe Mutter, he begins. He writes that he is coming. He writes that he is well. He writes, without adjectives, the nouns that will fit past any censor. Work, bread, service, rules. He adds one more because it refuses to be left off the page. Movie. He decides, after a pause that runs the length of 2 fence posts outside the window, to include a sentence the censor may cut and may not. They kept their word. Beneath it, he writes his number 1 last time and the name of the camp, as if sketching a map of where his heart had lived while his body waited. The train gathers itself and leans east. Beside him, Dieter snores softly at once, a man who can sleep on a moving board if the ledger of his day ends clean. Across the aisle, Brandt holds a cookie like a medal and does not eat it. Kruger opens his notebook, tears out the last page carefully, and tucks it into the breast pocket of his tunic. Weber presses his forehead to the cold glass. The lights of Camp Algona slide away, then smudge, then go, leaving only the dark and the idea of a place where enemies played baseball and sang carols and stood inside a warm room together while shadows flickered on a white square. In the morning, the cars will smell of coal and orange peel and wool. The world will sit outside the window waiting to be stepped back into, altered in ways that this ride cannot prepare a man for. But tonight, in the long middle between departure and arrival, Weber holds the Coca-Cola cap in his fist and lets the tin warm to his skin. He thinks, absurdly and precisely, of ice cream gone to velvet on his tongue on the first night, and of a bell that rang as if calling a town to table. He closes his eyes, hears the rails sing, and carries forward the one story he knows he must tell, that in a foreign place under guard, a kind of ordinary mercy held, and that it held long enough to change a man